these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths. We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Sitrep number 10. Your access to just the news. We're going to talk about HIPC worldwide threats hearing over the last couple days in the Senate and the House with the top intelligence officials there to answer questions. The F-47 sixth-generation fighter, NASA astronauts saved in the effects of microgravity. My quest to create a select committee to defeat the Mexican drug cartels. Changes at the IRS, Treasury, Education Department, workforce reduction, Israel and Gaza, all of it, and we'll do it as fast as we can. So on Wednesday, the House Intelligence Committee held one of 3 public hearings that we normally conduct per year. Usually our hearings and meetings are held in a SCIF, which is a secure compartmentalized intelligence facility, which simply means an area where classified information can be discussed, and there's no phones allowed in, no smartwatches, or any other transmitting devices. The worldwide threats hearing we held coincided with the release of the Director of National Intelligence's annual threat assessment, sets the stage for what the Intelligence Committee will work on this year, and sets the stage and tells everyone what the administration's priorities will be with respect to intelligence. As you can imagine, a key component of of pretty much every Democrat who questioned our intelligence officials, which, by the way, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, FBI Director Kash Patel, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, General Cruz from the DIA, General Hawk from the NSA. Those were the poor, unfortunate folks questioned for 2 days straight from the Senate and the House. And of course, the main topic was the signal chat leak. Of course, as you probably well know, our National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, inadvertently, accidentally put an Atlantic reporter on what was deemed to be a sensitive text thread, a planning thread for recent strikes against the Houthis in Yemen. Successful strikes, I might add, that do a lot for protecting global shipping lanes and ensuring our deterrence against terrorist groups like the Houthis who are supported by state sponsors of terrorism like Iran. So overall, good stuff happening, except for this particular leak. And then there was this story in the Atlantic where that reporter detailed most of it. The administration maintains that no sources and methods were, I'm just going to tell you exactly what both sides say. The administration maintains that no sources and methods were revealed. This was not technically classified, and to the extent that it should have been classified, the Secretary of Defense does have the ability to make those decisions. That's one argument, and the Democrats would argue that any normal general from on down who did such a thing would be fired immediately. And that went back and forth. Republicans, if you take the time to watch the C-SPAN footage, we left it there. We asked about threats. I asked mostly about the situation in Mexico and our continued fight against the cartels, which President Trump takes very seriously, I'm happy to say. And I think so does everyone who's working for him. That being said, a variety of topics were covered, from China to Russia to Iran to North Korea, and their deepening cooperation with one another to develop this sort of axis to counter U.S. influence. It remains a problem and continues to be a problem. Not much has changed there. Now, one of the problems I see, at least as a near-term tactical problem, right? We might have a long-term strategic problem, an issue with an adversary like China. We have a lot of fires to put out around the world. There's counterterrorism threats that still persist all over the world and are constantly planning and trying to attack the homeland. The FBI has undone a remarkable number of these plots, more than you probably realize. So that still remains a threat. But of course, the threat inside Mexico, our biggest trading partner, is a narco-terrorism insurgency threat that must be dealt with. And there's a unique time to actually deal with it because there's a new administration in Mexico and there's a new administration in America, and both want the same thing. For once, I've made the argument over and over again that Congress needs to act. I will be introducing legislation to create a select committee to fight the cartels because, and why select committee? The reasoning is because this particular issue cuts across multiple committees of jurisdiction. I mean, there's a finance element to it. So that's financial services. Well, there's a Homeland Security element to it. Well, that's the Committee of Homeland Security. Well, there's a judicial element to it. The DOJ and the FBI play a part. Well, that's the Judiciary Committee. The Intelligence Committee plays a huge part. Well, that's my committee. Armed Services will play a huge part, especially with the new FTO designation from President Trump. There is no single person is working on this, except for our small task force and just my personal staff in the office that we've been working on this for the last couple of years. We need a real committee with some real professional staff to run to ground a lot of the questions we have, and at least started with, and also create professional legislation that will actually help the Trump administration defeat this target in the short term against fentanyl, and in the long term defeat the cartels in their entirety, so that Mexico can be a prosperous, safe, and secure state like we want it to be. And I think the Mexicans, of course, want it to be. That's why you need a select committee, and I'll continue to fight that battle. And it is indeed a battle. Simply because there was a news article today, and certain sources in leadership's team say, well, it's just too expensive. Well, just to be clear for everyone, we're talking about $3 to $5 million to create what I think is immensely necessary if Congress is going to give the authorities and the funding necessary to the administration to actually take this battle on. Moving on to the Middle East, Gaza refused to release hostages, and Israel has attacked. So the ceasefire in Gaza broke after Hamas refused to release their remaining hostages as negotiated in a ceasefire deal and launched rockets into Israel. That led to Israeli troops going back into northern Gaza. This new offensive in Gaza is expected to be more intense and destructive as it pushes to achieve broader goals with fewer limits. Defense Minister Israel Katz warned that operations will escalate until Hamas releases the 59 remaining hostages, only 24 of which are believed to still be alive. Israel believes the hostages still held by Hamas include 41 Israeli civilians, 13 soldiers, and 5 non-Israelis. One living American, and the remains of 4 others are also being held. President Trump's administration has expressed its full support, previously saying there would be hell to pay if Hamas does not release all remaining hostages. The remaining hostages were to be released under the previously agreed ceasefire, which began January 19th, lasted 42 days. Israel partially withdrew, increased aid. Hamas released 25 living and 8 deceased hostages in exchange for 1,900 Palestinian prisoners under Phase 1 of the deal. Phase 2 was supposed to include a full Israeli withdrawal and a permanent ceasefire, but never began because Hamas refused further hostage releases without a permanent truce, and Israel refused to stop targeting Hamas. Now back home. Changes at the IRS. After years of stonewalling, retaliation, and courtroom drama, 2 whistleblower IRS agents are finally getting their due and a front row seat to reform the very agency that tried to sideline them. Trump administration is cleaning house and putting truth tellers in charge. Now, covered extensively in 2023 when it first broke, IRS agents Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler came forward and exposed political interference in the Hunter Biden tax probe. They alleged the DOJ slow-walked the investigation and blocked leads tied to President Biden despite clear evidence of tax felonies. After testifying to Congress and going public with CBS News, both men were removed from the case and benched with pay. Then came the smears. Hunter Biden's attorney accused them of leaking grand jury information despite the fact that the investigation had already been publicly acknowledged. The IRS retaliated heavily against Shipley and Ziegler after they came forward. And the kicker, these agents were later vindicated by nonpartisan investigators. They did what was right, and they were punished for it. And what came of that investigation that they were pursuing? Hunter Biden eventually pled guilty. His father unsurprisingly stepped in with a pardon, while the lead investigators at the IRS spent their time harassing and retaliating against its whistleblowers. Now, President Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, is flipping the script. In a statement Tuesday, told Fox News that Shapley and Ziegler will have 1 year to investigate what's really going on at the IRS. That's some poetic justice. His words, this Hunter Biden nonsense isn't going to happen again. The timing of all this isn't accidental. The IRS is in the middle of a major overhaul with plans to cut its workforce by nearly half. It's part of a broader Trump-led push to right-size the federal government and restore accountability to federal agencies. Meanwhile, Hunter Biden is still making headlines. Just last week, a California judge approved his request to drop a lawsuit against a former Trump aide who released materials from the infamous laptop. Why drop it? According to court filings, Hunter said his art isn't selling. His income's dried up, and he was forced out of his rental home after the LA fires. This is the man the Department of Justice bent over backward to protect. But at least he got a pardon from his dad. Moving on to the Education Department workforce reduction. President Trump has signed an executive order initiating the process to downsize and eventually dismantle the Department of Education to the greatest extent allowed by law. Remember, Congress must pass a bill to fully dissolve the department, so don't believe the mainstream headlines claiming Trump is unilaterally closing it. That's why I'm giving you the facts here in the Sitrep. The plan aims to shift education authority away from the federal government and return it to states and local communities. So the order signed on March 20th directs Education Secretary Linda McMahon to begin transferring key responsibilities of the department to other federal agencies, ultimately to the states. This includes things like student loan oversight and special education programs. For example, federal student loan programs could move to the Small Business Administration. Programs for students with disabilities may be handed off to the Department of Health and Human Services. And so none of the grants, none of the actual things the Department of Education does, remember, it doesn't educate. It's a pass-through organization. It's a giant administration just to pass through grants. The grants aren't going away. The idea is to reorganize it in a more efficient manner. So this executive order signals a clear policy direction. It's just less bureaucracy, more local control. Critics claim it disrupts the system, but it's just not necessarily true. According to a most recent national report card from the National Center for Education, just 26% of 8th graders are proficient in math, only 31% are proficient in reading. These are actually declining in recent years despite the DOE's bloated budget and role. So, not that it's responsible for these bad, there's a lot of factors that are responsible for these bad numbers that we keep hearing over and over again. But the point is that whatever DOE is doing, it's not making it better. So, and let's not forget that DOE has had over 4,400 employees and a budget of nearly $90 billion, yet 2/3 of Americans say public education is going in the wrong direction. So it's not obvious who the massive bureaucracy is serving. I believe this is long overdue. Let's talk about the fluoride water debate. Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has not been shy about his goal to make America healthy again and how to do it. One of those proposals is to remove fluoride from drinking water. It's been an ongoing debate for decades. It's picked up steam recently under RFK Jr. Wall Street Journal recently ran an article, Inside America's Fluoride Rebellion, that looked at the debate over removing fluoridated water in Bartow, Florida. So why is fluoride in drinking water? It strengthens teeth before birth, it prevents cavities, it helps those without access to regular dental care. And that doesn't sound like a bad thing, right? So why the opposition? Critics argue it's a bygone necessity. When fluoridated water was introduced in the 1940s, toothpaste and mouthwashes didn't contain fluoride. Now they do, making fluoride not just accessible, but everywhere. That leads to concerns over fluoride side effects, especially on kids. An August 2024 study by the National Toxicology Program found that higher exposure to fluoride has a moderate correlation with lower IQ in children. A month later, a judge found that fluoride in drinking water, though not injurious, poses an unreasonable risk in order for the EPA to take action. States and municipalities have recently been doing away with water fluoridation. In 2022, 63% of Americans had fluoride in their tap water. However, in Florida, 23 cities and counties have ended their programs since last September. 8 of 12 states that mandate fluoridization have bills in their legislatures to end adding the chemical. On Sunday, Utah's governor said he would sign the ban on fluoridation. God, that is a mouthful to say. No pun intended. Passed by Utah's legislature last month. You can check whether your water is fluoridated on the CDC's website and My Water's fluoridation page. Let's talk about stem cells that can repair damaged eyes. I'm not sure my eye would do well from that, but maybe yours would. So some interesting news you probably haven't heard. A clinical trial for a cutting-edge stem cell therapy targeting corneal injuries just proved it's not only safe, but highly effective. 14 patients were treated. By 18 months, nearly 80% saw a full restoration of vision. This is published in Nature Communications. It's a breakthrough that offers new hope for those facing blindness. This is the kind of innovation that changes lives. How does it work? Doctors take stem cells from a healthy part of the patient's own eye, grow them into a tissue graft over a few weeks, and then transplant them into a damaged eye. And it works fast. Half of the patients had full corneal restoration by 3 months, and that number shot up to nearly 80% by a year and a half. Even those with partial success saw vision improvements nonetheless. I will just say, knowing a lot about eye anatomy, the easiest thing to do is to deal with the cornea. It gets a lot more complicated when you say you need a new lens like I would. A little tougher to grow. And of course, a retinal detachment and retinal damage that's really difficult to deal with as well. So we're still far away from even understanding how the eye works, how it connects with the optic nerve and sends those signals and translates those signals to your brain. It's quite astonishing. And it's also why I can't get a robotic eye yet. In other news, back to defense, on March 21st, President Trump announced the F-47 stealth fighter jet as part of the Pentagon's Next Generation Air Dominance program. Designed to replace the F-22, the F-47 will enhance stealth and power while competing with China's air capabilities. Boeing will develop the F-47, a name referring to our 47th president, in case you were wondering where the heck we get these numbers from. So The NGAD program is a top-secret U.S. Air Force initiative launched in 2014, obviously not that top secret because it's all over the news, to maintain air superiority through a network of advanced integrated systems. It was based on Defense Science Board study that called for a more flexible, connected approach to combat rather than relying on a single weapon system. By 2019, the Air Force created an office dedicated to fast-tracking the program's development using digital engineering techniques. Now, the F-47 hasn't yet been certified and fielded. President Trump claims it will be the primary manned aircraft in the NGAD program. It will feature advanced stealth technologies, make it nearly invisible, capable of bypassing Chinese air defenses. Additionally, it will serve as the quarterback to a fleet of unmanned drones, often called collaborative combat aircraft. That's the future of warfare, as we're learning in Ukraine. A few details about the fighter are public, but Trump claims test flights started 5 years ago. It's public that Boeing, not Lockheed Martin, will build the aircraft, a significant win amid Boeing's recent defense contract losses and plane crashes. The exact cost of the contract is unknown, but experts estimate probably $50 billion. Critics argue the program is costly, potentially unnecessary, especially as the Pentagon is still grappling with the $1.7 trillion, God, those numbers are bad, $1.7 trillion F-35 and developing the B-21 Raider, which will feature similar advanced technologies like AI, stealth, and next-gen materials. Just remember, for context, in December of 2024, China introduced the J-36. It's developed by Chengdu Aircraft Corporation. It features a tailless tri-jet design with a double delta wing, which tremendously increases stealth. And with its 3 engines, including a diverterless supersonic inlet, which enables supercruise without afterburners for improved speed and efficiency, the J-36 marks a significant advancement in aviation and stealth. The F-47 will compete with it to maintain American superiority in the skies. Speaking of skies and people coming down from them, the NASA astronauts were saved. So NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams are back on Earth after spending nearly 9 months aboard the International Space Station. It started as a short test flight and a week-long stay on the ISS turned into one of NASA's longest recent missions, and not because they were stranded. Wilmore and Williams launched last June aboard Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, the first time Starliner flew with the crew. The mission was supposed to last just 8 days, but the spacecraft experienced propulsion issues after docking with the ISS, including thruster failures and helium leaks. So the key point here, NASA could have brought them home at any time using a SpaceX capsule. Instead, they made the strategic decision to keep Wilmore and Williams aboard. Why? Because the astronauts were healthy, the station had the capacity, and the agency wanted to make the most of having 2 extra seats, set of hands in orbit. So congratulations, astronauts. So for 286 days, they became full members of the ISS crew, running science experiments, supporting station operations, and helping test how future crews might adapt to longer missions. It wasn't a rescue situation, it was a calculated extension. So they finally returned this week aboard SpaceX's Crew Dragon capsule called Freedom, alongside NASA astronaut Nick Hague and Russian cosmonaut Alexander Gorbunov. The crew splashed down safely off the coast of Florida on March 18th. It wasn't the longest mission ever. Frank Rubio still holds that record with 371 days, but it was a masterclass in flexibility and value-driven planning. It also proves what happens when you put trust in your astronauts and some trust in private industry to help lead the way. If you read nothing else, some reading material for you. Robert Nicholson's Dreaming the Dream of a Free Lebanon in Providence Magazine tells the story of Lebanon's recent history through the life of Fawaz Najim, a Lebanese Maronite Christian who fought against Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and then Hezbollah before moving to Israel after the 2000 withdrawal from southern Lebanon. Lebanon's a fascinating place. Between Sunni, Shia, and Christian power structures and power structures in government. And, if it's ever a little bit more peaceful, I'd recommend a visit. I've been there a few times. That's all for today's Sitrep. Great to be with y'all.